I'm Cam Davis. I work with Mustangs, and you're tuned into another episode of Young Black Equestrians.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a young.
I am a young.
I'm a young.
I am.
And I am a young
Black.
A young black.
Young.
Black.
A young black.
Black equestrian.
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 Black equestrian.
Equestrian.
Black equestrian.
equestrian.
Black equestrian.
I'm a young black equestrian.
I am a young black equestrian.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Young Black Equestrians with your host, Abriana Johnson. Today, we have Cam Davis here with us, and I'm so excited to dive into this conversation because I have been following Cam on Facebook, a little bit on Instagram, and really seeing the work that she has done with Mustangs in general, as well as her own Mustang. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation, learn more about Cam and her horse and kind of the thought process behind all of that. So welcome to the show, Cam. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here. Awesome. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and what you do. I know I kind of spilled the beans a little bit, but tell us about you, what you do, your current horse, and what you guys are really working on. Yeah, so I'm Cam, and I have been doing a lot with Mustangs these past, I think I've been working with Mustangs for about 6 years. My current horse is Zen. He is a 6-year-old gelding who was gathered from a wild horse range in Nevada. His herd management area, which are different areas where they keep all the Mustangs, is called Meadow Valley Mountains, and his gather was considered an emergency gather because of all of the wildfires the West has been experiencing. Over 60% of his rangeland was destroyed, and the horses were in really bad condition, so they had to pull a lot of them out. And that was December 6th, so we're coming upon him being a full year out of the wild. And I picked him up on June 22nd. So he has had, I guess, about at this point, 4.5 months of handling. I keep him in a public lesson barn in Silver Spring. And yeah, we've been working a lot with Liberty. I gentled him at Liberty. He knew how to do a lot of Liberty work before he even ever wore a halter. And he was supposed to be my horse for the New Jersey Extreme Mustang Makeovers. They're Mustang competitions. Several are held throughout the year. But unfortunately, he got a really bad abscess like right before the competition. So I had to pull him out of that. But the plus side of that is that he got to stay with me since all of the horses are adopted out. It's the Extreme Mustang Makeover competitions are kind of used as a fundraiser to help support the adoption of more Mustangs, since there are over 50,000 of them in holding facilities right now, available for adoption for anywhere between $25 and $125, waiting for everyone out there watching this to give them a home. So it's a great program, and I'm just really excited that my wonderful little guy gets to stay with me. That was more about Zen, so I'm happy to answer anything about what I've been doing with horses in general. I love talking about it. Go ahead. Yeah, so I guess I've been working with horses since I was 5. That was when I took my very first riding lesson. I think I got more into lessons when I was around 6 or 7. And I started out very traditionally in lesson barns, riding school horses. I think I started showing around the age of 11 or 12 in hunter jumper, and then dabbled in some dressage, lower level eventing, and kind of got just the total horse bug. I was working at the barn. I was volunteering at Days End Farm Horse Rescue, anything I could do to get some extra horse time. I got a couple of leases going with some of the people who had purchased horses from the lesson program. I got to experience hundreds of wonderful horses in my time learning. And
I just found it so awesome to learn from lesson horses
Mhm.
because it was a new horse every single day. You'd come to the barn and have to work with someone new. And maybe horses that you didn't always want to work with or horses that you didn't get along with, but
Yeah.
you had to figure it out. And it just helped build all those skills because you learn to work with all sorts of different horses, which really kind of helped when I got to college. I decided I didn't want to be on a show team.
Mhm.
So I jumped into training with the Mustangs. And that was a huge learning curve from my first Mustang, who took me 5 weeks to get a halter on, to,
Mhm.
Zen, who I was sitting on with no saddle or bridle in 30 days. It's a huge change over those 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanna we're gonna learn more a little bit about that process. But
Yeah.
I wanna back up a little bit because we've had a member of the Bureau of Land Management on the podcast before, talking about the kind of process in the
Yeah.
rounding up and the adoption of wild Mustangs.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit more insight, because it is still pretty controversial,
Absolutely.
but this is kind of showing the other side, like the opportunity on the other side, and the relationship that you have with Zen. And some people don't understand, like you were saying, the wildfires, if there weren't these programs in place to help these horses, they wouldn't have that great of a fate. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course, yeah, it is a huge controversy and it is hugely political. And where we're sitting at now is that there really isn't a good solution or one that makes everyone happy. There are management numbers that each herd management area has about what the land can support. And of course, there are a lot of factors that go into it. There are the horses, there are the cattle ranchers, there are so many different stakeholders in this. And a lot of us who love working with Mustangs and adopting Mustangs would love to see a world where all of the wild horses could stay wild, but that's just not the current state of the world we are in now. So there are, we've been trying to, do the gathers and adoptions for decades now, ever since the 1970s. And it's been just really tough to kind of get people to adopt. I think a lot of media shows wild horses, they're untamable and they're really hard to work with and they'll always be wild. And all wild horses, like all domestic horses, have so different personalities. Some are easier, some are tougher. I know some people who will, skilled people who will be able to pull a horse out of a pen and sit on them the same day. And, others who take years and still don't want much to do with you. So it's a lot, it's kind of a situation where everyone kind of who is kind of concerned for the state of our wild horses kind of has to do whatever they can. There are wonderful sanctuaries who are trying to, adopt out horses, especially those tougher ones who have maybe been adopted but struggle with training. And there are the individual trainers, like the trainers as part of the trainer incentive program from the Mustang Heritage Foundation, or trainers like myself. I'm not a part of that program, but who likes to compete in makeover events, who just likes to pick up horses and either work with them to keep or to adopt out, who are just trying to show as much of the world as possible just how versatile these horses are. And there are also more recent initiatives in the last several years of trying to find a way to get sterilization into the herds. So maybe they can stay wild, but lower the population, but the logistics behind that are also really, really complicated. So it's one of those issues now that doesn't really have a great answer, but it never hurts to go kind of, if you love horses and you love Mustangs and you have someone to work with you and help you, the best a lot of individuals may be able to do is to, if they're looking for a horse, hook up with a trainer and pick up one of these horses out of the corrals. You can get a wonderful horse for as low as $25 and work with them. And if anyone looks up, Mustang videos, extreme Mustang makeover, or even just Elisa Wallace, she competes Mustangs in eventing, and you can just see all sorts of what these horses can do. They're really, really cool.
Right, right. And what kind of protections? I feel I'm trying to like remember back to the previous episode. There are some protections for these horses as well, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So the horses who are out on the range, no one can touch them except for the Bureau of Land Management. Once the horses are brought in, they're processed, and they are put up for adoption. So the horses who are put up for adoption are put up for $125, or if they're in the corrals, if they're in an online auction event, that's their starting price. And then when you get a horse for adoption, then those horses, you have to keep they still belong to the Bureau of Land Management for a year. Like I'm in the process of getting all my adoption paperwork done for Zen. They need to have a 6-foot fencing, very strict shelter, and food trailering requirements. And you can't sell the horse within a year of having the horse. If you want the horse to go to a different home, like trainers do, the horses are reassigned. So the Bureau of Land Management oversees that reassignment. And then there are, however, horses who have been up for up to 3 adoptions. They either go into long-term holding, and a bunch of people think long-term holding is a scary word. They're actually massive pastures. Long-term holding horses just get to kind of live out and not much happens to them. They stay there, and it's actually pretty close to where they would get in the wild in just separate ranges meant for horses who just haven't gotten adopted. Or they go up to sale authority. The sale authority horses are the $25 horses who you can buy outright. Anyone can buy them. And that's the program that's a little bit more controversial, because that is when they are no longer under protection. So anyone can go out and buy a horse. So we're hoping that, of course, people with the right intentions will want to buy them. But there is a point where the horses do lose that protection.
Okay, well, thank you for clearing that up for us, because I know a lot of people, have their heartstrings, pulled because of that story. But it's really important for us to understand kind of the entire spectrum and the intention behind it, and the multiple steps of opportunity that people have in that kind of cycle.
Absolutely.
So I want to bring it back to you. Okay. You used a term that I really love, and that I think really speaks to the work that you do. And you said that you gentled Zen. Talk about what that means for you and what that process looks like.
Oh yeah. So when I first was, in grade school looking at horse training books, whatever, the small section of books in my school library, and the ones in the greater library, whatever I can get my hands on, the common term was breaking. Breaking a horse, breaking a colt under saddle. And a lot of people started to look at that term, in the past decade or so, and thought, well, we don't want to break the horse. We don't want to break the horse's body. We don't want to break the horse's spirit. So for domesticated horses, that generally went from, colt breaking to colt starting. And for wild horses, we go from breaking Mustangs to gentling Mustangs. We want to make them easy to handle and kind of good domestic citizens. So and the process will look different with every horse, but even with the Mustang Heritage Foundation events, there is a very strict line in their rules and regulations that say least resistance technique should be used. So the Mustang Heritage Foundation themselves are a part of wanting this gentling process to happen with the horses, and as kind of way as possible. These horses have been through a lot, so just kind of trying to minimize the pressure put on them and set them up for success. With them, that looked like, gentling him at liberty without his halter, and teaching him how to listen to different cues, like from using like dressage whips, teaching him how to bend around, my whips, letting me touch him all over with my whips. Like if you have a wild horse, you don't want to go try to grab a foot with your hand. And, with different ways to work with that. My mentor was Hannah Catalino. She's competed in tons of Mustang events and is currently on the Mustang Discovery ride with her partner, Lisanne Fear, from Delaware to California. They're riding their Mustangs 5,000 miles and trying to get people to adopt 5,000 Mustangs along their journey. And other mentors include Luke Gingrich, Sam Van Fleet, and Mustang Maddie. All of these, a lot of people working with Mustangs and horses are kind of turning toward trying to use less aversive techniques, adding in some positive reinforcement. And it's just kind of there's a line, it's almost like a little bit of a dance as to wanting to make this situation as easy as possible for the horse, but also understanding that wild horses can react differently from domestic horses. My first Mustang, whenever I put pressure on him, he went to charge me. So there are some things that you have to, some boundaries that you have to put up to keep both of you safe, whether that looks like protected contact, whether that looks like adjusting a method to fit a particular horse. Meanwhile, a second Mustang I worked with was really flighty. She would never come toward me. And Zen is a little bit in between. He's really, really good natured, but if he gets confused and stressed, then he was a stallion in March and he'll show me some stallion behavior sometimes. But the gentling to me is just really kind of not wanting to break the spirit of the wild horse. It's so wonderful when you work with horses and they know they have some choice as to whether they participate. They'll give you a lot, or some days they say, hey, I'm not going to give you anything. But it makes it all the more rewarding when they do give you something, because you know that you kind of gave them some choice as much as you could within the environments that you're in, and they're kind of a part of the process as opposed to forcing everything on them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that honestly puts a little bit of more of a context to how I talk about my relationship with my horse and kind of what happened. I had him from 6 months old, so it wasn't like well, he was like trying to kill me for like the first 6 months, but in the years that we had together, by the time he was 2.5, 3, it was like, I didn't break him, I just don't like that term. It's like, it just wasn't a big deal, the same cues, relationships, actions, behaviors that we had on the ground. I was just like, hey, I'm gonna get on your back. And he was like, what are you doing up there? And I was like, walk on. And he's like, well, I know what walk on from the ground means. And I'm like, yeah, we're just gonna do it with me on your back. It's fine. And he's like, okay. And he walked, and it's like that kind of process instead of, going full, woohoo, I'm gonna jump on his back for the first time and see what happens kind of thing. It's like, there's so much of a difference that people can kind of pursue, so many different techniques that people can pursue when, working with horses, and whether they be, wild or domestic and untouched, that I really, that's what I really appreciate the most about your story, and watching you and Zen and seeing how you guys are able to kind of work together to achieve whatever the goal is that you're working on. So I think that leads into my next question. What is one of the biggest challenges that you faced, either working with Zen specifically or working with horses in general, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge with Zen is kind of like I briefly mentioned earlier, giving that horse some choice is a double-edged sword, because it can be really humbling to go out there and say, this is what you're going to do today. And Zen says, nope, I'm going to just go hang out and want absolutely nothing to do with you. And you're just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, what have I created? Because, I work with several horses who, you say jump, they say how high. I say jump, and Zen's like, I'll think about it. Like, right. I'll make that call. And most of the time he's pretty willing, but, sometimes he's not. And then that kind of turns into all right, what does this situation look like? Does he just not feel like it? Some days he just doesn't want to. Does he want to do something else? Did I ask in a strange way? How did I show up for him today? Did I show up, yank him out of the paddock and, put him somewhere and say, all right, let's do Liberty, come to me? And he's like, you are all riled up. I don't want anything to do with you today. And it's stuff like that. And, when mistakes come up, like when I started him under saddle, I put saddles in quotes because I didn't use a saddle, bareback and bridleless, his very first rides as a wild horse. And all of those cues, we used all of our Liberty cues, like using the dressage whips to aid our steering by guiding him, kind of knowing as you would pull on a rein to turn his nose. He learned that if I, held a whip on one side of him, he should turn away from that. So just kind of translating those different cues. Walk went great. Trot went great. Left lead canter went great. Right lead canter, he bucked me right off. And I'm just like, okay, so what happened there? And I knew exactly what happened because in all of my groundwork, I knew that first right lead canter transition, he's always a little hoppy. There's like a little bit of stiffness. And I didn't work him out of that before I got on. So I really kind of set myself up for that failure and being able to say, all right, what did I do wrong in this situation so I can help him and set him up better. And kind of always just knowing that when something happens, being able to sit back, evaluate, figure out what happened and go from there. Like, is it, was there a hole in training? Did I set this up to be something non-desirable for him? Is there pain? Is there a neurological issue going on? There are just so many questions. So every time I see something that I really don't expect from the horse, he and all the horses I worked with have really caused me to kind of go home, do homework, try to figure it out so I can come back from like a more educated lens.
Yes. That's so, it's funny to me when you were describing your first ride. I remember talking to my dad and he's like, oh, back in the day, we didn't have tack. What? We didn't have a saddle. We didn't have a bridle. And he literally said, like, the horses that he talks about finding a horse in the woods, but the horses that they rode, like, they literally rode them with sticks. And you tap on one side, that means go that way. Tap on, and it's like, not my father out here doing Liberty. Out of sheer, necessity. There wasn't any other option.
Absolutely.
So it's just so, like, when you were describing that, I was like, Lord have mercy. Don't let me tell him that he did something that people like aspire to nowadays.
Right. And something that I've seen a lot is that every time, there is like a pronounced Liberty trainer who comes up or like a video will go viral, people always people call Liberty like a new way of training, kind of like natural horsemanship. And it's not. People have been doing it, our Black horse ancestors have been doing it for decades. So nothing that we're doing is new. It's just like you said, it's going back to the way it used to be done. Right. But people stick some scientific terms behind it, and now it's new and exciting. But it's not new. It's going back to our roots in a way.
Right. So let's talk about what that kind of means for you. Do you have some sort of connection, or like, is there any like cultural significance for this work for you?
For me, there really wasn't when I started out. I was a little kid whose sister went on a field trip to a pony ride, and I was too young to ride, and I was mad about it. And I said, when I'm old enough, I'm going to ride a pony like my sister. And my family has no horse background at all. And I always kind of love the story of when I was first put on a horse. I was so excited. It was all I was looking forward to. It was a friend's birthday party. I was going to go on my first horseback riding pony ride. I was 5 and I was so excited. They put me on the horse. I guess I've always been afraid of heights because I was like, oh, it's a little high. They tell the horse to walk. I feel the horse lurch one step and I just start sobbing. I was like, get me off, no. I I changed my mind. So I was panicking. They took me off. I watched all the other kids ride. And my mom, all the people at the barn, they were like, you want to try again? And I said, nope, I'm done. But they convinced me finally to get on that horse again. And I always joke that my mom probably wishes she never did that, because I got on and then she couldn't get me off after I did that second time. And that was all I wanted to do. So
Yeah.
there was a barn really close to my house where I took, my first year or so of riding lessons, and I took a little bit of a break. I had a bunch of, ponies ran off, bucked me off, whatever. I think my mom was hoping I would get scared, and I didn't. That was all I wanted to do. But then I, eventually got back into it. And it was really just as I got older. Like, my mom took me to the Bill Pickett Rodeo when it went to DC, when I was younger. And then it was just kind of when in 2020, when there was kind of so much momentum behind Black Lives Matter, and I found out about so many other Black equestrians. I'd really only seen a few. And then I just realized that this work has a lot more cultural significance than I even knew about. And since then, that's been really important to me, and I'm really glad I found it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is a misconception that people may have about Liberty work, or maybe even work with the Mustangs? I know we've covered some, but is there anything that that's like glaringly obvious?
Yes. This was the first thing that came to mind. And I see Facebook posts or social media posts about this every day. The number one misconception about people who work with Liberty, who use, positive reinforcement, clicker training, working with treats, all of that I do with Zen, is that those horses have no rules. Like, when I talk about, Zen having choice when he comes in from the path, or when I go to him for a session, it starts when I go to get him from the field. That's true. But there are some things that he has to do as a good domestic citizen. He has better manners than most domestic horses who I know, because from the very beginning, all of that was very clear to him. He picks up his feet for the farrier. He still doesn't like shots. We're still working on it. I don't blame him. But, he stands to be tied. He stands for the hose, fly spray, grooming. He can stand quietly and not drag me to grass. And there is definitely a lot of those first few behaviors that you do when starting a horse, at Liberty, or using positive reinforcement, are foundation behaviors taught to set up your horse to be safe, not just around food, but around you. A lot of trainers start with working with your horse through the fence, so your horse doesn't mug you for food. The very first behavior that positive reinforcement trainers teach is for your horse to either turn away from you or put their head down to get a treat, and to just stand and wait for their treat. The very first positive reinforcement behavior your horse does is just stand there. And if they mug you, or if they get overexcited, then they don't get the reward. So all of this is set up to be very safe. And the horses do have, I know even boundaries can be a controversial term, because people think of boundaries as, smacking your horse in the face as they get into your space. But no, I just consider boundaries being able to work with a horse in a way that makes both of you as comfortable as possible. And to make, like, Zen lives at a boarding barn, there are hundreds of students and several staff members who come through every week who might come across him, and I have to make sure that he's safe for everybody. So that's definitely the biggest misconception, that our horses do whatever they want and they kick and they bite because they want food. But really, if you see that, there are definitely some holes in that foundation training that can normally be cleared up, and that horse can normally turn into a wonderful positive reinforcement or Liberty horse. Even though everything can sometimes look really, like flowery and wonderful and all about the bond, there are still some rules in place to keep everyone safe.
I honestly, I haven't really looked a lot into, like, the positive reinforcement training and things like that, just because I did a lot of I didn't have anything else to do for the first 2 years of his life, so I did a lot of groundwork for my my big horse, and so he's like literally like butter on the ground, specifically on the ground. He's freaking amazing. But with the mini, there's such a, because of his job and being around kids and his like affliction to any kind of snack, like I've just been like, I don't want him to look for snacks anywhere, and that's kind of what was taught in like a therapy role. Like snacks are not allowed when you're working. So it just makes me think of, how both are valuable, but how they have different roles based on the horse's jobs. So I just think it's important, as horse owners and, people being around horses, to know that everything has a place.
Oh yeah.
You can get into whatever, methods that suit the job, the horse, your understanding. Like, I feel like that's another thing that people kind of stigmatize about liberty and positive reinforcement. It's kind of like veganism.
Definitely.
Cult following, they're gonna bash you over the head with their ideals. Like, it's not that, y'all.
Right. And I mean, there are some people out there, they're kind of called positive reinforcement purists, and we tend to kind of stay away from them. There's no such thing as pure positive reinforcement, because training exists on a scale. If it's positive reinforcement in some way, it's probably negative reinforcement in another way. All of this kind of so closely intertwines. And like you said with your mini, there are certain situations where it's not the best thing to do with your horse. If you have a horse with insulin resistance and they really can't have that many treats, then by all means protect your horse. And you don't have to feel bad for using a different method with your horse because it's not what it works. If your horse gets super over aroused around food, like this normally happens if someone's horse has to be in a condition where, they're stabled for most of the day and they get feeding at set times, those horses normally get really over aroused around food because it's scheduled for them. And that's not a training issue as much as a living situation issue, but not everyone can change their horse's living situation. So you might not be able to engage in the training. Positive reinforcement training for a horse who has food anxiety is a really negative experience.
Right.
So keeping all of that in mind when you choose to work with your horse, and just reading your horse's like stress signals. Like, I had to figure it out with Zen at one point because he hated being asked to move like at a trot or quickly, and he would get ear pinny, swishing his head. And not just like, some horses, when they carry themselves really well, there is some aspect of tension. So, they lower their ears, and, horses don't have to look, super happy, pricked ears all the time. But he was clearly extremely agitated. So I had to figure out what I was doing to change how agitated he was. And sometimes that means take the treats away for a bit. And sometimes that means, we just go for long walks and jog so he can get comfortable in the trotting gait. All the transitions kind of hyped him up, so it looks different. And so I definitely agree with what you meant. I also wanted to point out that the fact that your young horse is great on the ground, even though you have them from a baby, is totally all you. Because I've seen most horses I know raised from babies are absolutely terrible, horrible manners. So I commend you for doing such an awesome job with your young horse.
Thank you. Yeah, it was like, what else we got? I mean, I know a lot of people like to, well, not a lot, I won't generalize it like that, but some people like to have that kind of spice, and they feel like if you handle them too much as a youngster, that they're not gonna be lively and showy as a performer. And it's like, I mean, on a trail ride, like, he will get up and go. Like, that's why I said he's great on the ground. When we get on a trail, he doesn't like to be behind anybody. He don't want, like, if we're going up a hill, he's hauling it. Like, I'm not saying he's great, perfect under saddle by any means, but on the ground, he's perfect. But so let's get into you and Zen and social media. Like, your pictures are amazing. I love, reading your thought process and your updates about him. What is your goal in really sharing and detailing this part of your life?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, there are kind of now so many factors. In the beginning, I just wanted to share what I was doing with my Mustang. I have had a really hard time gentling Mustangs in the past. So actually when I picked him up, I was like, I'm not going to share that much about him. I don't want to put that much pressure on him, I want to keep it nice and easy. And I shared one picture of him, and all the comments were, do you have a page? Where can I follow? Where can I follow? Where can I follow? So I was like, all right, I'll kind of see what happens. And yeah, it really is not being much of a social media person. His account has over 600 followers right now, which for me, I know some people are like $600 followers is some chump change. For me, I'm just like, oh my gosh.
If you had that many people in a room with you, you would be like,
yeah,
oh my God, there's so many people here. So
yeah, so
300 is plenty.
It means a lot that just, since the end of June, a lot of people are invested. And I think I love to spread the advocacy about the Mustangs, about Black equestrians, working with horses, working with Liberty, since a lot of, the pronounced Liberty trainers, all of the ones who I kind of named, who I've learned from, are all white trainers. So knowing that, you don't have to be like, it's like you said, it's kind of like veganism. When someone says vegan, they think of one type of person. When someone says liberty, they think of one type of person. And there are different people out there. And to just kind of bridge, I think I kind of consider it bridging the gap. I work at a traditional horseback riding stable, and I utilize a lot of different methods in working with horses. And I may be someone who isn't really sure about stepping into maybe positive reinforcement and liberty because of all of the people out there who are purists and they're kind of afraid to get beat down if they do something wrong. You can take it in baby steps, and you can add aspects of this training into what you already do, and you don't have to completely change your lifestyle to change a little bit and kind of figure out what works for you and your horse. And my goal is for everyone to just kind of enjoy horses and however that means for them, and just kind of have that mutual experience of enjoyment for horses and people working together. And as much as I can inspire, Black youth and youth of color along the way, I would love to do that.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I can see that that's exactly what's coming out of the story that you are sharing with Zen. Is there any that was kind of laced with advice, but what would you tell someone who is just trying to get into horses in general?
I'm stealing this quote from Clarence Crumpton. He is the very first Black person I ever saw at a Mustang makeover event in 2015. I'm sure there were others. He was the first one I saw personally, and it was the first Mustang event I ever saw in person in Virginia in 2015. And he's been judging the Pennsylvania TIP challenge, which is it's a non-riding Mustang makeover event. And TIP is what stands for the Trainer Incentive Program that the Mustang Heritage Foundation does. And extreme Mustang makeovers are riding events, but TIP challenges are just the groundwork. So they're an awesome place to enter if someone's like, I can't ride a Mustang in 100 days. I can't either. I feel like there are a lot more TIP challenges in my future than Mustang makeover events. It's hard. But he judges the Pennsylvania one, and his event, he wants everyone to come out of that event feeling really good about them, about their horse, and he wants the horses to learn something. So as a competitor was taking their horse through the trail class, and they were just stuck at this obstacle, and Clarence was helping them get the horse through the obstacle. It was a competition, but he said, you have your score. Now I want you to help your horse. So as they were working through this, he said, remember, when you're working with him, there's no wrong, there's just learning. You're either getting it right or you're learning, and it's only wrong if you're hurting yourself or the horse. And that's really helped me whenever I've had a day where it felt like everything went wrong and Zen ran away from me. And, I'm just like, oh man, what am I even doing here? It's all part of a learning process, and learning can be really hard, but anyone who wants to dip their feet in, there's going to be a lot of stuff that seems like it goes wrong, but everything will help you learn. And I couldn't be where I am today if it weren't for all of those experiences that made me feel like an absolute failure, but kind of continuing to learn from them the best I could.
Yeah, that is an amazing realization, because when we're talking to people who are have aspirations of showing, and who are looking for trainers, and are trying to find horses, it can feel like a lot is going wrong, or not only a lot is going wrong, but nothing's going right, kind of thing. When it's what you're saying is you just have to ask yourself, like, what did I learn from this?
Right.
What I learned about myself, what I learned about my horse, and go from there, instead of going downhill. So what does the word equestrian mean to you?
For me, I always thought about it as, someone who's riding a horse, but as a person now who spends most of my time with horses on the ground, I just think it's someone who works with a horse. And despite kind of the connotation toward riding in the traditional definition of the word, I just think that if you're out there with a horse, I invite anyone who's out there with a horse to consider themselves an equestrian, if that's how they, if that resonates with them.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good. Really good. All right. So now we're going into the Derby round, which is questions you just answer as quickly as you can. First thing that comes to mind.
Awesome.
And it's just a little bit of fun. So here we go. All right. English or Western?
English. Okay.
Now I feel bad because I feel like there should be an option where there is bareback. So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Like as soon as it came out, I was like, ugh, okay. We'll add that in there. Thank you. Solids or spots?
Solids.
Bays or grays?
Bays. Brown tack or black tack? Black tack.
Yeah. Sponge or curry brush?
Curry.
Shod or barefoot?
Barefoot.
Bumper pull or gooseneck?
Gooseneck.
Rope halter or a nylon halter?
Rope. Wood fence or electric fence? Electric.
What is your favorite piece of barn equipment?
Oh, my cookie pouch. I'll go positive reinforcement trainer on you.
Literally no one else will ever say that. Favorite piece of tack?
My bareback pad. It's really comfy.
Yeah. Well, when was the last time you fell off?
When was August 25th when Zen chucked me that ride? Yeah.
I'm like, I should just mention that.
Yeah.
If money was no object, what is one horse related purchase you would make?
Can I just say an entire horse sanctuary? Is that asking too much?
No, it's not. Yeah, a whole sanctuary. Yes, that is really cool. Well, thank you, Cam, so much for coming on episode today and sharing your story with us. Is there anything else you want to leave with our audience?
I just say, just go out there and enjoy horses in whatever way you can. If it's, calling up a place and saying, hey, can I come pet them and see what it's all about? Can I watch you all? Then that's great. If, you want to go out and just sit in the field with your horse, that's great too. I feel like I've been in the place where I felt a lot of pressure to do something with my horse. But at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying it, then what did you put in all this hard work for? So go have fun with your horse.
Yeah. Let everyone know where they can find you and watch your journey with Zen.
Yeah, the best place to find me is on Facebook, facebook.com/Zen the Mustang. All of my updates, everything I'll ever post about there will start then. And from there, maybe you'll get connected to any other places. But if you've got one place to go, that's the place.
Yeah, good. Perfect. Well,
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Young Black Equestrians. Head over to our Facebook or Instagram pages and let us know what you thought about that episode. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and have the opportunity to be featured in our next episode. See you next week.